It's a real delight to be with you here at this, and thanks to everybody who came over. I will also add to that I was also a classroom teacher at a classical Christian school for 7 years. So I cut my teeth in teaching at Cair Paravel Latin School in Topeka, Kansas, which was ostensibly the very first classical Christian school of the contemporary moment, started in 1980. So that's where I learned my trade as a classical educator. I'm just really delighted to be here. I love being with other teachers. And I will say some of the best things that ever happened at Cair Paravel came out of moments like this. When we weren't in the classroom, you can't hear me. That is something I am rarely told. Usually my voice carries. I can also speak louder, absolutely. Great. I sometimes tell my students a story about Benjamin Franklin. I'm from Philadelphia, that's where I live now. And George Whitefield was preaching the Second Great Awakening in Philadelphia, and Benjamin Franklin was one of his good friends. And Franklin wondered how many people Whitefield was speaking to without amplification. And so Franklin walked around this large crowd and then did what Franklin does, which he determined like how much square footage each person would have. And he figured that without amplification, Whitefield on top of a tree stump was speaking to 20,000 people who could hear him all around this circle. So I'll try to channel Whitefield a little bit here. Now Whitefield was trained as a stage actor, and so he knew how to project his voice. So I was just saying that it's a delight to be here, and some of the best things that happened at the school that I spoke at or that I taught at happened in moments like this, when we weren't in the classroom, when we weren't in the lunchroom running from one class to the next, but when we gathered with one another in moments of leisure and talked about education and just dreamed what could we do at our school. So it's great if you're here with other teachers from your school. Sometimes that's when the most productive things happen, when 2 or 3 of you can take ideas back to your school. And so hopefully what we reflect on today and all these sessions are just the beginnings of conversations for you with your faculty of friends who live at the heart of your school. It's also great to be with educators because if you just look around. Now really look around. These people sitting in this room will have a profound impact on other human persons, the students in their classrooms. And those students will grow up, and through those students, you sitting in this room will have an incredible impact on the families those people go on to make, and the churches they live in, and the neighborhoods they help create, and the cultures they curate. And so each person here, I'm sure, in the lives of 1 or 2 or more students, you'll be that teacher that Peter was reflecting on earlier, that teacher that they remember. I don't know who that was for you, that significant teacher, that significant professor. For me, it was Mrs. Spilly. Mrs. Shirley Spilly was my grade 5 teacher. And Mrs. Spilly, in retrospect, I think she was the first teacher who took me and my goofy student colleagues, took us seriously as moral agents and helped us take ourselves seriously as moral agents, and took us seriously as rational knowers and helped us take ourselves seriously as rational knowers. But I think Mrs. Spilly, I remember her in particular because she always seemed excited about whatever it was that we were learning. It was like she was learning along with us. So if we were learning about ancient Greek culture or the Pilgrims or the Revolutionary War, or we were reading Charlotte's Web or very elementary kind of astronomy, Mrs. Spilly was stuck in right with us, thrilled to relearn in a way what we were learning. Now, of course, like you, I had other teachers and professors. I remember a theology professor who also loved literature and jazz music and classical theater, and a biblical studies professor who was a marathoner and loved to fly fish and wrote poetry. These kind of teachers that I think probably we all have this great cloud of witnesses of teachers in our minds. So I don't know who's come to mind for you right now, but hold them in your mind. Just see their faces, name them as we turn to another great teacher, one of our great classical educators, John Henry Newman. Now, Newman, some of us have been reading him long before he became trendy, as he has in the last decade or so. But Newman, in the 1850s, he wrote a series of relatively little-known reflections on education. And he published them in a weekly called the Catholic University Gazette. Now, this is different from his idea of a university, which is much better known. But in one of these earliest reflections, Newman reflects on a brand new technology that promised to revolutionize how the common person learned, and that promised to diminish the need for schools, universities, and teachers. This was to usher in the great democratization of knowledge, disseminate information to the masses, and usher in social progress. And no, it wasn't the internet, but the buzz around it was similar. You know what this great new invention was? The rapid printing press. And the rapid printing press allowed for the production of cheap paperbacks capable of being delivered to anybody, anywhere. I mean, it's very similar to the buzz for a while that was around ebooks displacing paper books and online courses displacing brick and mortar schools. And now, of course, AGI and ChatGPT replacing, well, all of us. But this cheap and rapid printing led to the proliferation, among other things, of public libraries, right? You don't have Carnegie libraries and public libraries and reading rooms unless you have books to fill them up. So the rapid printing press led to the creation of public libraries and reading rooms. And while Newman thought that, this great explosion of publication and reading was generally fine, though it meant that a lot of people were going to be reading a lot of bad books. And as an aside, this is where we first come across the phrase great books, because people started distinguishing the great books from the little books. But we get that terminology here. But Newman had two real reservations about this new moment. One, he addressed to Prime Minister Robert Peel, who was the prime minister at the time. Peel thought that this great explosion of reading was not going to only be a boon for general knowledge of the masses, but also for their moral formation. He seemed to think that people would be so distracted from by reading that they would no longer spend their time, drinking in the pub and brawling on the football pitch. Newman was understandably skeptical. But more to our purpose, Newman wondered this question, and it's something we should reflect on. Does the mere access to information make ordinary embodied human teachers unnecessary? And if not, why not? I mean, this is a live existential question for us right now, maybe even more than it was for Newman in the 1850s. Right? Does access to information and knowledge make ordinary embodied human teachers unnecessary? And if not, why not? How do you answer that question? I mean, avatars delivering AI-generated lectures are much cheaper and a lot more convenient than you are. Now, how do we answer that question? Here's how Newman answered that question. He wrote this: when students aim at something precise, and you have handouts coming around so that you don't have to take pictures of the quotes that are on the screen. So all the main quotes I'm going to use are on these handouts. But don't get ahead of me. Don't read ahead. So when students aim at something precise, something refined, something really luminous, something really large, something choice, they avail themselves of oral instruction, of present communication between man and man, of teachers instead of learning, of the personal influence of a master and the humble initiation of a disciple. If we wish to become exact and fully furnished in any branch of knowledge which is diversified and complicated, we must consult the living man and listen to his living voice. No book, he writes, can convey the special spirit and delicate peculiarities of its subject with that rapidity and certainty which attend on the sympathy of mind with mind. through the eyes, the look, the accent, and the manner in casual expressions thrown off at the moment, and the unstudied turns of familiar phrases. The general principles of any study you may learn by books at home, but the detail, the color, the tone, the air, the life which makes it live in us, you must catch all those from those in whom it lives already. We must come to the teachers of wisdom to learn wisdom. We must repair to the fountain and drink there. Portions of it may go from thence to the ends of the earth by means of books, but the fullness is in one place alone. Now sit with that. Let me read it again. And as I do, I want you to attend to Newman and allow yourself to attend to those phrases or words that resonate with you. But let's hear them again. When students aim at something precise, something refined, something really luminous, something really large, something choice, they avail themselves of oral instruction, of present communication between man and man, of teachers instead of learning, of the personal influence of a master and the humble initiation of a disciple. If we wish to become exact and fully furnished in any branch of knowledge which is diversified and complicated, we must consult the living man and listen to his living voice. No book, however wonderful they are, no book can convey the special spirit and the delicate peculiarities of its subject with that rapidity and certainty which attend on the sympathy of mind with mind, through the looks, through the eyes, the look, the accent, and the manner in casual expressions thrown off at the moment, and the unstudied turns of familiar phrases. The general principles of any study you may learn by books at home, but the detail, the color, the tone, the air, the life which makes it live in us, you must catch all those from those in whom it lives already. We must come to the teachers of wisdom to learn wisdom. We must repair to the fountain, ad fontes, and drink there. Portions of it may go from thence to the ends of the earth by means of books alone, but the fullness is in one place alone. By means of books, but the fullness is in one place alone. Which phrases, terms resonated with you? Take a moment. They give you 60 seconds each. Turn to the person next to you and identify. Just tell them which of these phrases, which of these ideas, which of these words resonated with you as I read that through twice. All right. I gave you this quote because this is a great paragraph to seminar on with your faculty. At your next faculty meeting, just send out this paragraph, read it around a couple times, and just have a conversation as a faculty. Here's some of the phrases that resonated with me as I read it through in preparation for this talk again. This line, that people avail themselves of teachers instead of learning, that was interesting to me, and I think resonates with something Peter said, that he doesn't remember what he learned in fifth grade, but he remembers his fifth grade teacher. I remember. I know what I came away with from Mrs. Spilly, and actually I do remember some of the things that Mrs. Spilly taught us. But it was more about who Mrs. Spilly was, I think, for me, and so it was more availing myself of a teacher than just the content that she was delivering to me. This phrase in the middle really struck me this time. That part of that relationship between teacher and student, part of the learning occurs in casual expressions thrown off at the moment, and the unstudied turns of familiar phrases. Got a glitch in my computer I'm working with. But that to me, that doesn't happen in the classroom when I'm delivering a lesson or delivering a lecture, does it? I mean, casual expressions cast off in the moment, that kind of thing only happens in informal interactions with my students in casual conversations, when we're talking about something outside of the classroom. And the program that I run, the Templeton Honors College, our pedagogy is really predicated on personal relationships. And we just designed a new building, and one of the things we designed in it is just all kinds of spaces where teachers and students can interact in an informal way. And I think probably because I'm queuing off Newman here, and I think that's right, and I think for me as well, I learned so much from my professors and teachers in conversations outside of the classroom. When I was seeing them process and firing questions at them. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to especially is this last line, and this is what really strikes me. We must come to the teachers to learn wisdom. We must repair to the fountain. Do you know that phrase? To the fountain ad fontes. This was the great rallying cry of the Renaissance. Ad fontes means to the sources, to the fount. And it's what took the Renaissance back to the classical era. And it's what took the reformers back to like the actual Greek and Hebrew text of Scripture. Repairing to the fountains, though, in the Renaissance meant repairing to the ancient authors and their primal books. In the classical school world, we have schools called ad fontes, to the original sources. We have publications called ad fontes, to the original sources. And we read the great texts because we see them as sources of the great tradition that flowed from them. But notice how Newman is using this phrase. He is not using this phrase to refer to the great books of the tradition, is he? He is not referring to Plato and Aristotle, Sappho or Seneca, Hopkins or Jane Austen. But to whom? You and me. He's referring to contemporary teachers as living fountains and sources of the nourishing water our students need. Now, let's let that weigh upon you for a second. This phrase that almost exclusively usually refers to the great sources of learning, Newman reconfigures it and says, no, that's the contemporary teacher. Because you see, though Jane Austen and Plato and my beloved Dante and others have many things to offer your students that you can't, fair enough, you have things to offer your students that they can't. What is that? It is a living embodiment of an ordinary human person living the classical tradition in their own time and place. Let me say that again. What you have to offer that Plato and Aristotle don't, what Dante and Sappho don't, is a living embodiment of an ordinary human person living the classical tradition in their time and place. Right? To develop Newman's metaphor a little bit, local teachers in local schools like you and me need to be the deep wells that nourish culturally shallow and intellectually parched students adrift in desert wastelands of social media and pop culture. Now, I'm a Kansas and Missouri boy from the heartland of America. And I know that, yes, water from one well does taste different from water from another well. Right? You can go down the road in Kansas and drink water from that farm's well and that farm's well. And they're going to be slightly different. But you know what? It's all water. And it all quenches my deep thirst that I have. And it all helps me live, regardless of which well that water comes from. And you, teachers, are the deep wells that your students have access to. Again, because while the writings of Dante, Aristotle, Kipling, whomever may be part of the curriculum, Aristotle, Dante, and Kipling themselves are not. But you are. And that's important to see because classical education, and this is something we I think in the classical school world might have missed for a long time, classical education is not simply about passing on classical content. It's not simply about passing on the linguistic skills of the trivium, the mathematical skills of the quadrivium, or the artistic skills of the performing arts, the liberal arts and performing arts, and doing so through classical methods. So it's not about just passing on classical materials through classical means. It's about passing on what we might call a classical way of living, pursuing a flourishing life. So classical education that we're involved in or want to be involved in, the classical Christian liberal arts tradition, it is an invitation and an initiation into a way of living. I tell my students it's simply an apprenticeship. And all I'm doing is helping them practice 4 years the way that I hope they live the rest of their lives. And that requires you and I living models who can apprentice people to classical living. So again, that requires that students and their parents, by the way, have living models of what wonder looks like, what wisdom looks like, how virtue lives in the world, what service and friendship look like, and what good taste looks like in their time and place. See, only by offering ourselves as living models of the classical tradition will they and their families catch, as Newman says, the detail, the color, the tone, the air, and life that breathes in and through classical education and classical living. If you will, this is really a kind of a master and apprentice model of education. We heard Peter mention the word mimesis this morning, and it's part of the classical tradition that students learn by imitation. This is St. Paul telling Timothy, follow me as I follow Christ. That's what we're doing. It means teachers offer students water from their own well, wells that have been sunk deep into the tradition, into which the waters of the tradition can flow and then overflow to the lives of our students and their families. It means we're part of the curriculum, like it or not. Now, maybe this seems idealistic to you, and maybe you don't know Newman, and maybe you're slightly skeptical of Newman's bona fides pedigree, either in the classical or the Christian tradition. That might not be the case. But if you don't know him, Newman was educated at Oxford in classics, which is really their old great books program. He was a fellow and tutor at Oriel College, Oxford. He was a founder of the Catholic University of Dublin and the Oratory School of Birmingham, where he spent the last decades of his life. He taught university students, he taught working class adults, and one of his greatest delights was teaching grade school children. He started a scientific journal and was a strong advocate for the study of both mathematics and science. Under him, Gerard Manley Hopkins became a Catholic, and living in his oratory, the young J.R.R. Tolkien received his earliest formation right after Newman's death. He writes this, "From first to last, education has been my line." No less than James Joyce wrote, "Nobody has ever written English prose that can be compared with John Henry Newman." Hopkins, one of our greatest English poets ever, writes that our greatest living master of style and our widest mind is Newman. I love this. Twice Gerard Manley Hopkins offered to write a commentary on one of Newman's books. You know what Newman told him to do instead? Write poetry. That's pedagogical prudence is what that is. You English teachers will appreciate that, right? Imagine if he didn't write poetry and is writing commentaries on Newman's books. But thinkers throughout the last 150 years have acknowledged their indebtedness to Newman, including Henry James, Michael Polanyi, Bernard Lonergan, Wittgenstein, Jaroslav Pelikan, Alistair McIntyre, Pope John Paul II, and me. So his rootedness in the tradition is deep, and he is one of our great classical Christian educators. But Newman is not alone in identifying the life, the character, and the person of the teacher as part of the curriculum. See, he was a student of the tradition, and he learned from the tradition, just like so many of us have. He learned from Plato, who writes this, "In the first place, the guardian educator should compel the teachers themselves to learn and to praise the writings they're going to teach." And here's a word to you headmasters. If there are any teachers who find the writings unpleasing, he should not employ them. He goes on, he should instead use only those who vote with him in their praise of the writings. It is to these men that he should give the young to be taught and educated. You see what Plato is referencing here? Teachers should know the tradition, and they should know the text, and they should love the tradition, and they should love the text. And if they don't, then they're not the right teacher for your classical liberal arts school. And occasionally, those are the kind of teachers that you might have to invite to go find another place to teach, in another school. Not only Plato, Quintilian. Our first task should be to inquire whether the teacher is of good character. Not our first task is to figure out what we should teach and how we should teach it, not the methods, not the materials, but the person of the teacher. Let his discourse, the teacher's, continually turn on what is good and honorable. He should declaim daily himself. He should practice his rhetorical skill daily. For however many models for imitation, mimesis, he may give them from the authors they are reading, it will still be found that fuller nourishment is provided by what? The living voice which proceeds from the teacher himself. Here, the teacher as a source, the teacher as a living model, the character of the teacher as part of the curriculum. I'm just going to pile these on. We need to hear this over and over and over again. Here's Plutarch. We now reach a topic more important and vital than any yet treated. What's that? That of the right teachers for our children. The kind to be sought are those whose lives are irreproachable, character, whose characters are unimpugned, and whose skill and experience are the best. The root or fountainhead of character lies in receiving the proper education from the right kind of teacher. Here, life, character, skill, the person of the teacher. Now, no talk of mine fails to mention Hugh of St. Victor, a great 12th century educator in the classical tradition that Jolie quoted earlier. Here, I'll let one of his students testify to what he learned from Hugh of St. Victor and why he studied with Hugh. He's writing his family in England why he left England to go to Paris, and he says this: "With all possible dispatch, I chose the excellent and unique doctor, and I embraced his teaching with supreme diligence, since, note, the moral excellence of his life decorates his learning, and the saintliness of this teacher illuminates his polished teaching with beauty of manners." It's not what he taught first, but who he was. Moving on, great 14th and 15th century author Christine de Pizan. If you don't know her works, you should know her works. She writes this in her book on political philosophy that both Elizabeth I and Henry VIII knew well. She says, "One ought to provide a tutor who is wise and prudent more in morals than in lofty learning, despite the fact that in ancient times the children of princes were taught by philosophers." She says, "Nevertheless, I believe it would be better to have a very discreet and wise tutor who had good morals and loved God, rather than the most excellent and subtle philosopher." Yet I love this. "Yet it would be much more praiseworthy to find a perfect one who is a notable scholar as well." She's like, I really want both of them. And if I find both of them, then I've got the ideal teacher. And much more recent, near our own time, the great black classicist from the late 19th century, Anna Julia Cooper, she writes this in an essay called The Humor of Teaching, which always, for me, balances out Philip Melanchthon's great essay called The Misery of Teachers, things that all of us could resonate with. But Cooper writes this in the late 19th century, and boy, does this sound contemporary. "We have been so ridden with tests and measurements, so leashed and spurred for percentages, that the machinery has run away with the mass production and quite a way back off, bumped off the drivers. I wonder," get this, she's writing this in like 1904, "I wonder that a robot has not been invented to make the assignments, give the objective tests, mark the scores, and chloroform all teachers who dared bring original thought to the specific problems and needs of their pupils." Just had to wait 100 years. But notice what she says. "Ideas are as potent today as they were 2,000 years ago, when poor but aspiring men of Rome sent their sons all the way to Rhodes. Why? To get the touch of Apollonius, an instructor who is himself keen about the enigma of the universe, or even about the enigma of Mississippi and Texas, will find his flaming torch catching." Friends, many things have changed over the course of this great tradition called the liberal arts tradition, the Christian classical education. How we teach, some of what we teach, where we teach, who we teach, like any tradition, these have developed. But this great litany shows us that one thing has not changed. And this is the tradition we're a part of. And if we don't want to step into this tradition and offer our own lives as part of the curriculum we're offering our students, then we need to step out of this tradition. Because this is what is required of the classical educator. The educator who steps into the Christian liberal arts tradition must offer themselves as part of the curriculum to their students. So amidst all of our talk about classical curriculum, classical materials, and classical pedagogy, classical methods, we are misaligned with the tradition if we don't also consider the teacher as part of that curriculum. And we have to do this in company with our fellow teachers, the faculty of friends who are at the heart of your school, because it's from that faculty of friends that the culture of the school emerges. And it's in that culture that your students will be formed during some of the most impressionable years of their lives. So this is a call not just to us as individual teachers, but to the faculty of friends that form the heart of your school. Okay. There's the rub, as Hamlet might say. There's the rub. Because if we are part of the curriculum, part of the course through which our students are run, it requires that we as teachers and our colleagues give what Newman called real assent to the tradition and not just notional assent. Notional assent for Newman refers to a relatively detached acceptance of some abstract concept or idea, right? It's not that it's shallow assent. It's just that it doesn't really involve much of me as a person, personally, emotionally, materially, spiritually, physically. It's something I assent to as true that doesn't necessarily affect who I am as a person, right? I might notionally assent, for example, to the common humanity of each person. I believe we're all made in the image of God. And I might still treat people poorly. Notional assent. I might have notional assent to the fact that war is a tragic event and not feel anything when it breaks out. Right? A notional assent to the existence of God and the creeds, but never pray. That's notional assent. A notional assent to that caring for the vulnerable is good, or giving money to people in need is good, but then never do it myself. That's notional assent. Likewise, we may give, and some of our colleagues may give, notional assent to the value and the goods of a classical education for our students, or see it as good for our culture, and simply teach as disciplinary specialists or a technician, rather than as an educator embodying and living the classical tradition in their own life, rather than allowing the classical tradition to flow through them and affect the way they think and live and act and spend their time and spend their money. But we don't want teachers who give mere notional assent to the tradition. In contrast, real assent, it's going to be clear, describes an embodied, affective, personal conviction and commitment that leads to action. For you theologians, this is fides qua, not just fides quae. Fides qua is the faith that does the believing. Fides quae is the faith that is believed. The church has always made a distinction between these two. The faith that is assented to and is believed, and the faith that does the believing and does the living itself. This involves apprehending and assenting with one's whole person to the classical tradition. When a classical teacher has real assent to the goodness of classical education, he or she can live in a way that they hope their students might follow. That teacher who has real assent to the tradition pursues their own intellectual virtue, pursues their own moral virtue, develops their own leisured wonder, knows the goodness of friendship and service and delight in the good things that God has given us. When that happens, Newman has another great phrase for this. He calls it a rhetoric in conduct. And sometimes a rhetoric in conduct is the most persuasive form of rhetoric there is. The teacher giving real assent to the tradition embodies a rhetoric of conduct. It's why I remember Mrs. Spilly, not because of what she taught me, but because of who she was. It's why I remember Jekina Stark and J.K. Jones and Nigel Bigger and Eugene Peterson, because of who these people were, not just what they taught me. So Newman and the tradition, they put this question to us. It's a bracing question. And it forces us to ask ourselves, am I pursuing not just classical teaching through classical methods, but am I pursuing a classical way of living? Am I attending to my own integrated formation intellectually, morally, aesthetically, spiritually, physically, practically, socially? Can I offer myself as one model, not the model, but a model of classical living in the world? You see, because according to this tradition and all the people from our tradition that we just heard, I mean, those are fellow educators. If we had more time, I would go through and read more from their writings, and you would see, yeah, they were classroom educators. I mean, they complain about 12-year-olds. They complain about parents. They knew what it was like to take students through material they didn't want to learn. But every single one of them tells us that teachers need to be the kind of people they want their students to become. Now, hear that. Teachers need to be the kind of people they want their students to become. Because so often, students will become the kind of people their teachers are. Newman's belief in this formational significance of personal encounter is captured in his motto, cor ad cor loquitur, heart speaks to heart. This was the motto for Newman's oratory school in Birmingham, and it's captured in this wonderful reflection from Augustine on catechizing the uninstructed. And here the great educator reflects this. He says, if we find it tedious to repeat familiar material that's suitable to a little child, let us be suitable to our students by a love that is brotherly, fatherly, and motherly. For the affection of sympathetic souls, hear Newman there? The affection of sympathetic souls, when our students are affected by our speaking and we by their learning, it's what I saw in Mrs. Spilly, is enough to make us dwell in one another. It is as if they speak in us what they hear and we learn in them what we teach. Doesn't it often happen like this? We show people some spacious, beautiful place in the city or country which they have never seen, but which we have often passed by and seen without pleasure. And our delight is renewed by their delight in its novelty. And the deeper our friendship, the more this happens. Because the more we live in them by the bond of love, the more those things become new to us which used to be old. Isn't that beautiful? But it's predicated on this relationship and love and being able to delight in what they're learning and learn along with them. This is cor ad cor loquitur. So, friends, how do you respond to this? Let me ask some questions as we think about how we might live the tradition in our own lives. And I offer these questions to you. Just reflect on them in your own heart as we go through them. Ask yourself, do I live differently? Do I live differently because I'm living in the classical tradition? Does it flow through me? How do I decorate my home? Is it different because I'm a classical educator? How do I choose my entertainment? Is it different because I'm a classical educator through whom the classical tradition flows? Do I converse differently about different kinds of things because the tradition lives in me? Are there books that we tell our students every educated adult should read, but that I haven't read? Does your school tell students you really must read X book, but they know that half their teachers haven't? Do we tell them that Homer and Dante and Shakespeare are essential, yet we've never read them? Ask yourself, do I read in the classical liberal arts tradition? Have I adopted my taste and carved out time to read the books that our students read? A couple years ago, a friend of mine who's a literary man, he was astounded to find out that I had never read Don Quixote or Moby Dick. And I was like, those are really big books, and I'm really busy. But I thought, yeah, there's a reason that people still read Don Quixote and Moby Dick, and I should read Don Quixote and Moby Dick. So I carved out time over the course of a year to read Don Quixote and Moby Dick. I still think they needed editors, but they're pretty marvelous pieces of work, and I'm better for it. You know, is it Flannery O'Connor you haven't read? Is it Dostoevsky that Peter was talking about? I think we should all read Dante. He's the great Christian epic. But do we read the books that we tell our students they should read? This is a challenging one for me. Do I read in the contemplative mode or only in the active mode? Right? Those of us that teach literature, I read a lot, but I read it to teach it. And that's very different than reading in the contemplative mode. Reading in the contemplative mode is reading the book as a great work of beauty, as a work of art, as a work of spiritual devotion, not to teach it. And that is a different mode. Sometimes I find myself reading a lot, but only trying to figure out how am I going to teach Nicomachean Ethics on Monday? Or how am I going to teach the Odyssey, which I'm doing right now? Or how am I going to teach whatever it happens to be? So do we carve out time to read in the contemplative mode? Another question. Am I attentive to my own moral formation? Am I aware of my virtues and vices? My moral character? Am I attending to those moral deficiencies in my own life? Do I practice wonder and leisure? And do my students know that I practice wonder and leisure? Do they know what I'm reading? Do they know I go to the theater to see Hamlet just because it's a beautiful work of art and it's good for me to participate in beauty? What could I learn along with my students? It's a challenging one. Do you know Latin? Learn it with your students. Do you know how to draw? Learn alongside your students as they learn. Let them see you as a learner. Do you know whatever it happens to be, astronomy, medieval history, poetry? Let them see you as a learner. I remember I had done 2 graduate degrees and I'd been teaching for 6 years, and I went back to school to learn German. And all of a sudden, man, my world just was turned upside down. And I was back in the classroom. Well, I was used to being in charge, to being up here, to doing this. And all of a sudden, I was in a room with 18-year-olds learning German, and I was like 40, I think. And it was profoundly unsettling to me. But I shared it with my students. And I said, I sympathize with where you're at, trying to, learn Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan with me. You don't get that? German, I don't really get either. But do we learn alongside our students, and can we let them see us learning alongside them? Could I pursue another degree? And again, do I attend to my own integrated intellectual, moral, aesthetic, spiritual, physical, practical, and social formation? And finally, how do I compare to my school's portrait of a graduate? I don't know if your schools have these things. Lots of schools have these portraits of a graduate, and it's on their websites, and they'll say, this is who our graduates are. This is what they know and what we expect them to do. I don't know if you have those. It's a fascinating exercise to take that portrait of a graduate and put it in front of your faculty and ask them, do we live up to this standard? Okay, questions for teachers. If you're a headmaster, or you run a school, or you're a principal, a few questions for you. Do you create time for your faculty to read the books you assign your students? Right? All of us in our schools, we had it at Cara Paravel, we had professional development days. Professional development days felt like 3 solid days of back-to-back-to-back-to-back meetings. Why not do classical development and instead give all of your teachers a book or a poem or a short story that you assign your students, give them good coffee, give them nice comfy chairs, and give them 3 hours to just go read? That's professional development for a classical educator. Do we create space for our teachers? Those of us who run schools, I have to do the same thing. I have a faculty of 15, faculty of 20, actually. Do I attend to their formation as classical educators? Second, do I foster meetings of the faculty and not just faculty meetings? I see smiles. You know the difference. Faculty meetings are when we attend to all the what's going to happen when, and when does 5th grade need to show up here, and who's taking a field trip somewhere, and what's the new policy on the dress code. Those are faculty meetings. Meetings of the faculty are what happens in moments like this. At Cara Paravel, we started practicing on Friday afternoon, skole in the skole, leisure in the library. Somebody would bring good food. Actually, this often happened at O'Reilly's Pub around the corner more than ever, but it was just the idea of faculty getting together to have conversations with one another. meetings of the faculty, not just faculty meetings. Do we have common faculty offices or common faculty spaces where faculty can gather and have these unstudied conversations and informal conversations? Do my faculty have the opportunities to demonstrate and to practice wonder and leisure together? Do we take faculty trips to the museum, faculty trips to performing arts events, faculty trips to see a Shakespeare play or the ballet, faculty trips to do some stargazing and storytelling? Do we give our faculty opportunities to do what we hope our students are doing? Principals, educators, headmasters, do we make it possible for our teachers to pursue advanced education? Do we give them copies of the books that they teach their students? This one, do we have faculty summer reads, and do we give them space to have seminars when we come together in whenever the beginning of your school year happens to be? Right. Do our faculty have conversations or debates in front of our students, where we model for our students what it looks like when reasonably educated, mature adults have conversations about complex topics? This is something we do in our college regularly. We have faculty on stage. For instance, we just did this. We had an Orthodox, a Roman Catholic, and a Protestant on stage together from our faculty, and we said, talk about the Eucharist in front of our students. Right? And they got to see how we can disagree about complex topics without any of us thinking somebody else is wicked or stupid. And it was remarkable kind of practice that we fostered, at least in our college, that's really good for our faculty, but also for our students, where they see us as learners and educators. Okay, how do my faculty and my board members model classical living beyond classical learning? So these are the serious questions, I think, that help go through all this. I went back one too many. But why does this is the question, why does a teacher's real assent to the classical tradition matter? Why does it matter that we present to students a rhetoric and conduct? Why do my students and their parents need me to sink my shaft deep into the tradition, again, so that it wells up with water from the tradition and overflows to them? Why does it matter that we pursue classical living and not just classical learning? And why, back to my original question, do we think that neither great books alone or online classes or ChatGPT or AI can replace ordinary embodied human teachers? And why has the life of the teacher always been part of the curriculum? It's because of what Newman told us. The general principles, sure, you can learn by books at home, but the detail, the color, the tone, the air, and catch this, the life which makes it live in us, you must catch all those from those in whom it lives already. And if it does not live in us, it will not live in our students. We must come to the teachers, that's us, to learn wisdom. We must repair to the fountain, like it or not, that's us, and drink there. The fullness is in one place alone, and that one place is the individual faculty members that we are and the faculty of friends that are at the heart of our schools, from which the culture emerges in which our students will be formed as we apprentice them to the classical way of living in our contemporary moment. Why? So that they can be nourished and pursue their own flourishing, but also so that the families they create, the neighborhoods they indwell, the businesses they work in, the churches they populate, and the cultures they create and curate can also approach some kind of flourishing. And why? Because they saw models of classical living in the teachers that they had in Mrs. Spilly, in Dr. Williams, in Mrs. Hodge, and in each one of you. It's good work to be a part of, friends, and I'm glad to be part of it with you. Thank you. Now I'm curious, we have some time. So let me pose this question. What are you thinking now?
Just one thing. Australia's. Yeah, thanks. Just one thing that did come to my mind. Australia has not had a liberal arts tradition for a long, long time. Yep. And our problem is a lot of us read it in books, and it maybe watch videos, have the odd guest speaker, but we don't have someone to catch it from.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And that's why, I would just say to that, and probably a lot of you could reflect upon this. This is I often say, this is a 50, 100, 150 year project we're on. All right. So the question is not what can we get done by January of 26, but it's by January of 21, 26, if you will. Right. And so it is, that's why we are still in a kind of recovery mode here. And none of us, me included, I didn't get a classical education growing up. I got a very mediocre education. But I got turned on to some great books, and I had some good teachers along the way, to be sure. And so this is a long tradition. It's a long project for us. And I will say, I'll say this a little bit more tomorrow. I've worked with a network of classical schools across Central Africa and 11 African countries, and they are doing remarkable things. And I'll share a little bit about that tomorrow. But they have even less a tradition than you do here of liberal arts education, but they are in the active recovery mode. And they know they're in recovery mode, and so they have to be patient as we do with any kind of cultural change. It's taken a long, well, I'll leave it there. But yeah, I hear that, and I think that's why it's important. That's probably why it's even more important that each one of us then attends to our own formation. And we rediscover this stuff. If you've not read Hopkins, learn to find some English teachers and teach you to read Hopkins, or whatever it happens to be. Immerse yourself in it, on your own, so that then we do have people who can pass this on. That's great. Yeah, what else are you thinking?
I want to ask a question. With faculty development.
Right.
I'm really mindful, my faculty have families that have got a lot of other responsibilities, and it's that how do you do it carefully where you don't burn them out?
Right.
Especially when
Great. Okay. So it's like this. Okay. So we can talk. A couple things come to mind. One, give them poetic experiences of the tradition. I don't know if you know the term poetic knowledge and the idea of poetic knowledge and wonder. My friend James Taylor wrote a book called Poetic Knowledge back in the 80s. And the school that I taught at, it was founded by a bunch of graduates of this program that James graduated from, this integrated humanities program at the University of Kansas back in the day. But one of the things that we learn about poetic knowledge is that sometimes, I can tell you that beauty is important. Okay, this is a great example. Do you know who Kenneth Branagh is? A great Shakespearean actor, right? I saw him perform Hamlet on stage at Stratford back in 92. But he says that he hated Shakespeare in high school. Why did Branagh hate Shakespeare in high school, do you think? Because all they did was read it. That's a terrible way to teach Shakespeare. That's like reading a movie script and pretending you know it, you saw the movie. You didn't see the movie. And then what does Branagh say? The first time he saw Shakespeare perform, he was like, oh, that's Shakespeare. And then he fell in love with it and became Kenneth Branagh, right? So sometimes with our faculty members, it's not just telling them, oh, here, read the Iliad. It's sometimes to bring them along, it's giving them kind of poetic experience of the tradition. Take them to a play. Take them, have an outing of your faculty to the local art museum with a docent who can tell you what you're seeing. Give them the experience of beauty. Give them the experience of wonder. Sometimes, don't in a faculty meeting, well, most of what goes on in faculty meetings you can communicate via emails, by the way. Have meetings of the faculty and just read a poem together. They've already set aside that hour for a faculty meeting. Just, honor it by doing something actually significant. Read a poem together and just talk about it as a faculty, right? Give them a book in the summer. Don't start with Dante's Comedy and say, read it by yourself. Also not a good idea, right? But as John Senior, an educator from this program would say, he would say, start with the good books to get you to the great books. Right? And so read a book in the summer that you could read and then come back and talk about it when you get together. Right? But think about where could my faculty be in 10 years? All right? So maybe I don't start by handing them Dante's Comedy, or maybe our faculty meetings this next year, we are going to carve out an extra hour, but we're going to read a canto together. Right? And so I think you're absolutely right. You can't lay tons of burdens upon them because, let's face it, teaching is hard. But to create spaces and to give them opportunities in times you're already meeting and in the summer and those kinds of things, I think you can do that. And then it starts awakening their own wonder and delight. And you're always going to have some teachers who will take more and as much as you can give them, right? Or, I remember Mr. Henry when I was teaching at Cair Paravel, and we would do these summer professional developments. And one time, Mr. Henry came in and did an hour-long lesson on just how to draw. That's great, and it was so fun and hilarious because so many of us were bad, But he was teaching us what he was teaching our students, right? And so that kind of thing, I mean, that is building the culture of your faculty. I think I would say. Yeah. What else are you thinking? Yeah, in the back. Pretend you're Wycliffe.
When I grew up as a kid, teenager, being conformist was a real insult. You didn't want to be conformist. But now as an adult out in the world, I think, gee, we need a lot more conformist. But then listening to you, I'm backing, oh, gee, that sounds really conformist. Like everyone's being molded to age vision. So just want to hear you comment on conformism.
Oh yeah, sure. Listen, I grew up in 1980s as a punk rock kid and listened to Midnight Oil 24 hours a day. So I mean, those were my heroes back in the 80s. Those kind of 80s 90s punk rock bands. So I hear that, but no, I mean we want to conform to what's good, not just conform for the sake of conforming. I mean, and if something's good, it's good, period, right? So I would say, should you conform to like a healthy diet? Yeah, you should. Why? Because it's actually good for you. Should you conform to a practice of exercise? Yeah, why? Because it's good for you. Should you conform to reading like good literature? Why? Yeah, well, because it's good literature, right? And so when I say the tradition, I mean this long Christian liberal arts tradition of thinking, of engaging beauty, of pursuing holiness. So, I mean, and if you know the tradition at all, people don't agree in the tradition. I mean, just look at the Christian tradition. I mean, it is a recognizable tradition, but there's disagreements all over the place. The literary tradition, the philosophical tradition that we're a part of. I mean, there are disagreements all over the place. But do we think that there is a way that, and I'll comment on this afternoon, that we flourish? I mean, Jolie was talking about this. That we flourish intellectually? I mean, there is a way of thinking. And do we flourish as moral agents? There is. Is there a way we flourish spiritually? There is. And so it's not conforming for the sake of conforming, but it is recognizing the good for me as a person given the nature that God has given me. Believing that he's given me a human nature and that it flourishes in a certain way that's different from the flourishing of the tree. The tree needs different things than I do. My dog needs different things than I do. But each living thing, has a nature and flourishes in a particular way. There's a lot of latitude there, but acknowledging I have a nature and how does that nature flourish? And allowing our students, I think it's also one of the wonderful things about having a faculty of friends, having a faculty. They see us all living the classical tradition somewhat differently, right? And there's some things that I love and can do well that others can't, and they love and things do well that I can't, and we all have our own special interest. And so I think that provides a kind of variegated model of living the classical tradition. But it's a good question. Yeah, way in the back.
Just a question with regards to Australian setting. There's schools that want to become classical schools, and I know on the trade that there's a lot of pushback from, let's say, bureaucracy to make that happen. So where they're fighting basically education bureaucrats to turn their school from a systemic one to a classical, do you have any advice you could offer as to, and it might be beyond your scope, but do you have any advice to offer?
Yeah, when you say bureaucratic pushback to this, what does that reference?
Let's just say if you're in a government school using a government curriculum,
right,
and now you want to become a classical school but keep your school as it is. So what they're trying to do is become a more classical curriculum, but still get government education tips to still be considered to be educating kids in Australia.
Yeah.
What could you do? Any suggestions with dealing with that sort of situation?
Yeah.
It might be beyond.
Lucy didn't ring a bell at me. Yeah, that's good. Appreciate it. Yes, absolutely.
That is such a good question, but we have Richard Brown here today to answer that very question. Yes, because he's done exactly that.
That's great. And I mean, I would say, some of it's what can I do on the margins? Right, and again, playing the long game here, but some of it's I have a master's program that trains teachers in classical education, and I've had lots of public school teachers come through that who want to do this model of education, but have to find a way within the strictures of their schools to do that kind of thing. So, and with that, we're out of time. All right, thank you, folks. Wonderful to be with you.